just let you know, my name is Amanda Ryan or Amanda Crichlow Silva. Oh my God, I forgot my married name. I am so sorry to my poor husband. Um, I am the program director for the Tri-Faith Initiative, and this is a new series that we have titled Seen Unseen. And I'm very excited for this series. We're going to be doing it around lines of intersectional, generational type identities. And this first one is going to be around millennials and kind of that age frame. And if you saw in the beginning slides, there is a little definition of when millennials start. And just so you know, this is according to the Pew Forum in 2019, that millennials are born between 1981 and 1996. And then Generation Z, which is after millennials, is 1997 to 2012. And Generation X, which is on the lower end of our cusp of generations, is 1965 to 1980. So you can see that generations vary in their length of time, and a lot of it has to do with technological advances and certain socio-political events that have happened that help to determine what a generation is. But with millennials, we really align with technology. And so I'm even though I'm firmly in the millennial camp, due to being raised in rural Nebraska and our technology there, I'm kind of more on the lower end because I can remember not having internet. I can remember having dial-up forever and not using social media until it had already been really established. So those are kind of some of the things that frame my identity when it comes to my age. And so with that being said, I just want to go over some quick ground rules. I know it's easy to ask questions about why millennials aren't engaging in religion the same way that we do, and that it could potentially be an opportunity for people to try to get millennials to engage more religiously. But that's not the point of this program, but it is to hear from millennials and people around the cusps to know why we believe in different ways. So I want to introduce our guests. First, I'm going to introduce Nurhan Basma. She is a congregant at AMI, and she will be providing her experience of her religious and generational identity. And then Lachelle Rankins is one of our staff members at Tri-Faith, and she is often at all of our programs, but sits in the corner and doesn't talk. So we're going to get her to talk today. And also Eric Servione is also on staff, and he will be providing his perspective as well. And I might call on some other people that I know are in the age bracket, which would be Jeremy Fricke, our education director, and Sierra Salgado Parigi, who is also our communications director. So they may be chiming in where they see fit or where I pull them in. So with that being said, Nurhan, do you want to give a little bit about you and who you are?
Yes, hello, my name's Nurhan Basma. As Amanda introduced me earlier, I religiously identify as Muslim. I identify as Muslim because I grew up in a Muslim household. My family and I moved from Egypt, actually, so that's just a little bit more background on me. But I also, in my journey for religion, I would say that I am trying to understand the other Abrahamic religions as well, being that I feel like they all intertwine at certain points. And I think that it's good to be able to understand the different perspectives within the religions. So.
Thank you. Lachelle, would you like to go next?
Yeah. Hi, and I'm Lachelle Rankins, and like Amanda said, I'm on staff at Tri-Faith. My religious identity, I would say, is really complicated. I guess technically I would identify as being part of the Christian faith. Growing up, I went to a predominantly Black church in Omaha, which was Assemblies of God, Church of God in Christ. And then I went to a Methodist church for about 10 years. And then in college, I went to an evangelical church. So I would say my identity right now is still technically Christian, also a little confused and always exploring.
And Eric.
Hey everybody, Eric Serione. Like Amanda mentioned, I'm also staff deputy director for the Tri-Faith Initiative. And my religious identity, well, if my mom was in the chat, I would say Roman Catholic. But since she's not, it really is complicated as well, where throughout my life, I've been trying to see myself as a Catholic and try to find that identity. But I just, the way life went for me, from my father passing away at a young age to joining the military, I just haven't been able to really make that leap of faith that's so important. And so, and I told Wendy this when I was very early on, that ulterior motive for me joining the staff at Tri-Faith was for me to get that exposure to different religions and to maybe find where I belong.
Awesome. Thank you all. My first question for you all is, do you identify as a millennial? And if so, why? Do you technically belong to a different age group, but kind of fit in with the millennial group? If you want to kind of explain that to us, whoever, we'll do this round robin. So whoever wants to go first can go first.
Well, I'll go. Michelle again. And I am an older millennial. I think technically I would be considered an exennial or whatever new term they came out with. So I was born in 1981. So I'm going to be 40 this year. And I like to think that I have the best qualities of the millennial generation and Generation X, and none of the bad qualities. My friends might think differently. But yeah, for the most part, I do identify as a millennial, just an older millennial. And like Amanda said, I remember pre-cell phones, pre-internet. Like when I was in college, I knew 2 people that had cell phones. Facebook was just being released to non-Ivy League schools. You had to have a .edu email address. You had to be invited. So yeah, I do consider myself a millennial, just older generation.
Yeah. Real quick, Lachelle, what would you say are the best qualities of both the age groups that you have?
I think for Generation X, there really is kind of a spirit of service and giving, helping others. And with the millennials, I think millennials get a bad rap. I actually think millennials are very similar to Generation X in that way. But on top of that, I would say the adaptive qualities, being able to go with the flow, go with changes, not being scared of all the different technological advances and all of the societal changes.
Yeah. Okay. Eric or Norhan? Norhan.
I can go next. I'm considered Gen Z because I was born in 1999, but I would say that I might have some traits from the millennial generation. I didn't have a cell phone until I was really young for someone to have a cell phone, and my parents weren't really big on social media, so we weren't able to have them until probably, I think, high school, if I really think back to it. But I'd probably more identify as Gen Z just because my window of no technology is very short, and I did grow up in I would think a big boom, because I mean for technology, because I remember like the iPad Nano coming out, and then all of a sudden there's 12 iPhones, or I don't even I can't keep track of how many, but that's how I would identify as a generation wise.
And Eric.
Yeah, I would definitely identify as a millennial. Something I noticed that Lachelle and Norhan, and I'm about to do the same, is that we identify through technology is what I noticed. Like and it really is, because for millennials, I think we were like some of the pioneers when it came to figuring out technology, using cell phones, figuring out the internet. Like we're trailblazers in that respect. And we have best of both worlds without technology and with technology. The piece of technology that always sprung to mind for me was I remember growing up on Nintendo, and that's like the NES. And that was really what I remember from growing up. Being 34, going to be 35 this year. Yeah, I don't know. I definitely identify as that millennial. And then what Lachelle had said also resonated with me, where like I'm very, very service oriented. I want experiences, things matter less, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I chime in one thing on
Yeah.
that? Just with the identifying generationally with technology. My nephew was born in 2003, I think, and one time he referred to himself as a millennial, and I was like, "You're not a millennial." And he was like, "Well, why? What's the difference?" And I was like, "Dude, touchscreen phones weren't a thing until I was in college." And like the just like confused look on his face, like it truly is interesting how that connects us.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then do generational categories serve a purpose for you? Do you see that they're useful or are they not?
I think I'll jump in. I think there are uses for them, but they can also be a little harmful, where you get some of the stereotypes, especially the negative stereotypes of millennials being, lazy, being afraid to work hard, et cetera, et cetera. And there it gets very easy to other somebody with a generational label. He's a millennial, and people understand our society. They understand what you mean by saying it that way. But at the same time, it's a great way to identify with people that have very similar lived experiences. So I think it's a both and.
I agree a lot with Eric. I think that having like titles for each generation is important, especially with what you were saying, the similar lives. But I also feel like there are a lot of people who live different lives. Not everyone has grown up, like even with technology around, there's a lot of parents that I know, I nanny for a family, and they're very big on technology. And I think that that's different than generation wise, but I feel like even with work ethic as well, people have different situations to where the traits that are given or the stereotypes that are given to each generation might not fit every single person who falls within that generation. So
yeah, and I'll third that. I agree. I think the problem, kind of like what Eric was talking about, is that culturally we tend to focus on more so the negative aspects of the different generations. I mean, people do it with like the boomer generation. And I just remember a few years ago, it's kind of stopped now, but it was like every week there was a story about how awful millennials were, and they killed this and they killed that, and they weren't eating tuna fish, and, just absolutely ridiculous things. So yeah, I think the only bad thing is the hyper focus on the negative aspects.
Mm-hmm.
I can, this is Mary. I'm sorry I joined a little bit late. I had trouble logging in. I was at a meeting somewhere else. For me, as a mother who has children, small children, I think technology has a huge thing in their lives nowadays, because even the school gives them an iPad and they play games at the school. And so it's just kind of how you watch your children about the, not to get access to the danger of the technology, like I have banned my son from YouTube. You can't watch YouTube anymore, because you know how YouTube is, like stuff pops up and that affects the kid's attitude so much.
Yeah.
My 9-year-old, I noticed he was watching stuff that are for older kids, YouTubers, and he wants to act like them. So you're like, no, you can't watch those, because you need to stay a kid. You need to act like a kid. So it's nowadays, if you don't know technology, you're lost. I mean, you're behind in the society.
Yeah.
Big time. It's part of the education in a way, but
Yeah,
it has its danger side too. So
Yeah, and that really started with the millennial generation. I can remember playing Oregon Trail on the computers and having a variety of different Apple products. And with each new wave, we'd get a new set. But because I lived in Minden, Nebraska, we were always at least one one generation of Apple products behind, at least.
Yeah.
I actually had to boot up when I was in third grade, boot up a computer that still had the black screen and the green font on it in order to play a math game to learn how to do math. So now let's bring in the religious aspect into it. I think one of the things that the millennial generation and then the generation after millennials is really turning to is these intersectional identities. So I do identify as a Latina Jew, and all of those, and a millennial, because I'm firmly in the millennial camp. If you read my bio on the website, I think the last paragraph says something about being, a millennial to my core and enjoying coffee and my cats, right? So that's one of those stereotypes that we play into, and I embrace it. But and that religious aspect is very important to me. So for our panelists, do you practice any sort of religious belief system or ritual practice? It could be spiritual. It doesn't have to be within the formal organizational type religious system. And if so, could you kind of describe what you do?
I can go.
I told them that these questions were going to be a surprise because I wanted them more off the cuff. So
Yeah,
here we are.
I do what I consider like prayerful meditation. I try to do that in the morning for about 5 to 10 minutes, just expressing thanks for like my blessings and expressing gratitude and trying to see like the positive things that are happening in my life and in the world. Um, and then I don't really do it anymore. I don't quite know when I stopped. Maybe it was COVID, but I used to always pray before every meal.
Oh, wow.
And I still do it just depending on who I'm with. But I don't do it as much. I actually think COVID might have contributed to that because I like quit eating out for like 6 months.
Could you tell us a little bit why you gravitated towards, mixing my words, towards mindfulness as a spiritual form for you?
I've been studying more about Buddhism. That's a huge part of it. And also I have anxiety, so just trying to like calm my mind and calm myself down, especially at night when I'm trying to sleep. And I just kind of incorporated that because I felt like there were things that I weren't getting just from like, saying prayers at night, or I used to study scripture, which I own like 5 Bibles actually, but I don't think I've cracked one open in probably like a year or two. So for me, it was probably trying to incorporate something different because I felt like what I was doing in the Christian tradition wasn't working anymore.
Okay.
Yeah,
Eric
I
or
used
Norma?
to I used to actually pray when I was younger, when I was in like from 10 to probably 15 years old, when I was still trying to find or identify with being a Catholic. And my family actually, we didn't really enforce practicing religious rituals or anything like that. Maybe we would light a candela, right, a candle to one of the patron saints, but yeah, that was about it. So in my adult life, I find that I don't really have a lot of ritual that I go through. That being said, like for me, a lot of it, I mean, Amanda, I'm very, very, very service oriented. So like I always look for those opportunities to serve, and like those are my rituals, like helping other people. That's how I do my part in that, in this greater world, and hopefully, appease whoever's up there.
Isn't that a good feeling? Helping others, it kind of gives you, the happiness so much. So I really, I'm like that too.
So Norhan, do you have anything to add to that one?
Yeah, similar to what Lachelle and Eric were saying. So when I was younger, my parents very big on like, you have to pray, you have to follow the certain rules within the religion, which I mean, I did obviously, and they would help me teach me through it. But as I got older, I felt like I was more going through the motions of everything rather than fully understanding the reason behind why I was doing what I was doing. So I'm definitely doing a lot of exploring when it comes to religion wise. But I did also pick up like meditation slash like like stretching yoga, I guess, because I worked in the ER for a little bit when COVID hit. So I was actually getting a lot of negative thoughts in mind. I felt like I just felt like this couldn't have hit at the worst time of my life, all this stuff. And I just didn't feel good feeling that way. And so I like started to meditate to try to think about things that I could appreciate, like my family, my friends, the things that I do have, a stable job, all that stuff, that there are things that I shouldn't, like, as much as like the pandemic has affected my life, I should still appreciate the things that I still have and that are still going for me. So when I like stretch out.
Believe her internet paused. But let's see if she comes back. But okay, now you're back.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
You're okay.
Where did I leave off? I heard you say my internet cut off.
Talking about the stretching and the mindfulness.
So basically I just try to think of the things that I appreciate and just think to myself and remind myself and set small goals and try to just be less negative and implement more positive affirmations and thoughts.
Yeah. So if I'm hearing the three of you correctly, it does sound like your belief systems have changed a little bit from your family. It could, it's a varying degree amongst the three of you. What would you say some of the differences are between how you practice and how your parents practiced or practice currently?
I can go first on this one. I think that the way that the biggest difference that I see between me and my parents is like, for example, if I have like a big exam coming up, my mom will constantly tell me to pray to God that I will succeed. And I disagree with praying to God for that success. Not that like I don't want to, but I feel like that success is going to come from me studying. So that's how my religious view is a little bit different, because I feel like that tendency on praying to God when you need good fortune or good luck on an exam isn't how I see that I should go about something that's coming, or like that said exam that's coming up. Mm-hmm. So that's that difference that I see between my beliefs in the religion versus my parents.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I would say, similar for me, like the church I grew up in, the Church of God in Christ. I mean, I used to be in church like 4 or 5 days a week. And they actually have a term, essentially, when you're not going to church, you're considered a backslider. Or when you're doing, you're drinking, smoking. So my mom at some point was a backslider. She quit going to church. So we quit going to church. But she's like back in the church, the same church that I used to go to when I was growing up. So she's there every Sunday. And it's not like, a 45-minute activity. I mean, it's still like you are in church Sunday from like 9 o'clock until like 3 o'clock. I mean, it's like an all day thing. And she still knows scripture. Like, I mean, she could quote scripture, like just from memory, probably the whole Bible. And she just, I feel like, has a certain amount of faith in God that I feel like I've just never had, even through all of her like struggles and, divorce and financial issues. Like, she's always just had a level of faith that I don't think I've ever had.
Yeah, for me, it was always my mom that was the very religious one, and she would tie daily activities and good news and things happening in a good way. She would always tie it to God. she would always remind me to wear my chain with the Mother Mary, Virgin Mary, right? Always, hey, make sure you have your chain on at all times. Keep that person close to you. When you're hoping for something, she would always say primero Dios. So God willing is translation there. Like always, you have to say those things, otherwise it won't be heard. And then, she would light the candle. We would always have at least one candle lit. We would always put it above the fridge because I was like the highest spot in the house. And you have to do those small little things to always be connected in some way. But for me, and then so that was on my mom's side, and as a kid, my dad, he actually converted to Mormonism, and that sowed a lot of confusion within our family. There's 6 siblings, and like half of them went to the Mormon side and the other half stayed Catholic. And so that sowed a lot of confusion with our practices and what we did, et cetera, et cetera. And again, just in my life, where it kind of, those small little things, trying to capture them back, but I've lost them, trying to find them again.
Yeah. I saw a lot of affirmation when Lachelle was talking about faith. So I wasn't planning on asking this, but I'm going to throw this out there impromptu. Why do you think there's that difference in level of faith between our parents' generation to us?
And let me kick it off, because I think it's tied to us being millennials. And here's what I mean, where we're very service oriented. We're very interconnected with our fellow human being, where I feel like with millennials, there is a sense of like humanism where, or secular humanism. And so we believe, like me personally, like I believe in people. That's what I believe in the most. And I, it sounds terrible saying it, but like I don't need religion to tell me that. So that's me as a millennial, me as Eric, where I don't need as much faith as my parents, who they needed a lot of faith to get across the border, right? They needed God with them to make the journey from El Salvador to California, because they had to rely on themselves and the powers above. So that's just my take on that.
Yeah.
I think for me, my level of religion is very different than anybody in my family for some reason. I think because I grew up, have had a lot of passion into religion and learning it. I remember one of the stories that got me so much into curiosity was the prophet of Moses. I mean, the story of Prophet Moses, where when he was a child, he was put in a basket in the water and all that. That kind of boosted a lot of my curiosity. So every night I would go to my dad and ask questions about different prophets and all that. And I think that kind of followed me up to this age. And I think the reason that it's different nowadays is because there's more education about religion. Not that I'm saying it was not, because like for me as a Muslim, Islam is like for 1400 years, but what I'm saying for like my generation, there's a lot of translations where I could go refer to easier than I would say when for my mom, because my mom is not educated, so she couldn't go to the translations and find out the meaning of it. She just believed into, let me read the Quran, and she felt the energy. And that's how she would go. But for me, I would read it and I like to understand it too. And that kind of gets me to a different level than my parents does. So just level of understanding of what you're studying, why you like it, why it's interests you so much. And like my children are 8 and 9, and believe it or not, they are so much into it that they want to pray as well. Like every night they come to me, they're like, Mom, let's pray. I'm like, yeah, let's pray together. And they want to learn. And I like to explain to them, to get them to that level of like, hey, you go and find the meaning of it so you could understand it, then you would make better decision as far as like to follow the religion in the way that you're supposed to, or understand the religion in the way that you're supposed to.
Right.
So I think that makes a difference. I think when it comes to my children, they will be more into, if they like religion as much as I do when they grow up, it would be different, because for them, they're probably gonna study more. They're probably gonna, because they're starting to kind of understand the meaning from now. And then if they continue to do this, I think they're going to do much better than I do. Or their belief system will maybe, not the same as I am, because my understanding is to the level of how much I studied.
I want to turn back to the panelists now. Thank you for your insight, Miriam. That reminds me that we're going to have to do another program for parents of people who have, elementary age children, because I did just see an article out of Pew, I believe, that was stating that children and teens are aligning more with their parents' religiosity. So I think that's something that you really highlighted. But for this conversation, I want to set the container to be a little bit more tight around millennials specifically. So I want to turn back. I think, Nurhan, you were going to say something about level of faith.
Yeah. So for my family, the difference between me and my parents, I think, isn't really generational, in my opinion. What I've always thought about is how my parents, they grew up in Egypt, and Islam is like the dominant religion there. And so the prayer call would go off to remind them to pray. And it wasn't, seen as weird or dangerous or anything for them to pray at school, at work, wherever they are. But when I'm here, the 5 prayers that we are supposed to pray throughout the day, that's hard to do in this lifestyle that I live in, in America. And like, even when I was in school in elementary through high school, like I would try to pray within school, but I always felt like if someone walked in this room and saw me, they might think that, like, make fun of me or judge me or whatever. So I feel like my faith had always played a part in the fact that I grew up here in a country that Islam, especially because we had moved in 2001, where, not a good time to be a Muslim in this country. But I think that that's the biggest difference that plays in our difference in faith, is because for them, they're surrounded by people who follow the same religion, as to where I was surrounded by multiple religions. And so it was easy for me to like stray off or try to like think like, oh, it's so much easier to be this religion because they don't have to pray 5 times a day, because I wasn't really understanding the actual reason behind faith, because I wasn't exposed to it the same way they were.
Right. Lachelle, did you want to add anything to that, or are you good?
I actually liked what Norhan just said, and I was just going to actually say, I think, like Sierra mentioned in the chat, a lot of it is just technology and access to so many different things, and also so many different people. I think all of our circles are a lot bigger, whereas before people were really confined to having people within their small community, and a lot of times it was their church community.
I want to pull some things from the chat right now that Sierra put in. She stated, if you want to say it, you can, if you want to, or do you have? Okay, I'll do it. Sierra said, I think our access to technology and information plays a role in that difference. And then the uncertainty of the decades that we have lived through have also played a difference in our levels of faith and religiosity. And that's something that I have posted about on social media, that people wonder why millennials are as depressed or have as many mental health issues, that we're also very open about talking about. And people are wondering why. And it's not necessarily turning away from faith that is making us more depressed or anxious. But it's more so seeing what's happening around us generationally. And my opinion is that we've seen our parents and our grandparents use faith as a way to get through those issues, but we haven't seen how that will help us in the decades that we've lived thus far. Does anybody else want to make a comment about that?
It definitely, from my perspective, it's it's where I've seen my parents, and they have relied, and this is my own personal journey, where my dad, he relied on faith to get him through his alcoholism, but alcoholism won. So to me, that was a personal experience that, like, it didn't work for him. I'm gonna go in the opposite direction. Or where I see a lot of my grandparents, they relied on faith super heavily, but they still had all the troubles that they had. So again, just those lived experiences where it got ingrained in me. Well, you know, it's the faith didn't do much for them. Yeah, what's it going to do for me?
Mhm.
But at the same time, and actually looking at something that Wendy had said, I have a very strong pull in my heart that there is someone, a much higher power and calling, but I don't know what that is. That's what I'm trying to find, right? I think I strayed from the question a bit, but I'll stop there.
Okay. Yeah, I think that is huge. And this brings me to one of my last questions before we get into questions from our audience to our panelists. How has COVID affected your religiosity or your practice? I think we all, as Sierra mentioned, the decades that we've lived through are pretty heavy. Millennials really don't know a society in the US without some sort of foreign war or foreign intervention that we as a nation have done. And now we have that and the legacy of that. And also, just recently is COVID and racial injustice, right? So, how has COVID in the 2020 in general um, affected your religiosity and your, I guess, ritual practice?
I'll go. Um, I think it's affected it. I wouldn't say it's increased my faith. If anything, I think it's actually increased my desire to like explore and figure things out. One thing I do think has changed, like I kind of talked about earlier with like the prayerful meditation, is COVID has actually made me try to be more of a positive person and focus more on like what I have as opposed to what I don't have. I actually put that in my like Happy New Year card. I was like, 2020 was a horrible year, but when I really think about it, everything that I needed was provided for. I had a job, I have an apartment, I have reliable transportation, I never went without food, I have clothing. So I think for me, it actually made me more grateful for all the things that I do have and helped me stop focusing so much on like what I don't have or like, I'm never going to pay off my student loans or, that kind of thing.
I don't think that COVID affected my religiosity as much, but maybe it has, and I just haven't noticed. But I think that uh, overall, I feel like it might have decreased because I've been so like panicky about like what I have to do from now, just with the pandemic and everything. So I think maybe my priorities may not be lying on religion at the moment. But thinking about it, I don't think that my behaviors or my thoughts have changed too much when it comes to religion. So.
Do you want to add anything, Eric?
Just to echo both Lachelle and Norhan, where it really hasn't affected my religious at all. But something that I tied to earlier, where service is very important to me, and that's like my way of doing the greater good piece. Or I have felt that I need to do more when it comes to helping my fellow, man and woman, in terms of like. Last week, I was doing the COVID shots, and I was helping give COVID shots here in Douglas County, and I absolutely love that. That's like, yes, we need more of that. I get fired up for those kind of things, and I'm seeing that I'm devoting even more of my time to the community service things that need to happen because of COVID. So, yeah.
So spirituality through action and service and justice.
Exactly.
Mhm. Jeremy posted, he sent me a direct message of a question that he would like to ask you. And it is also one that I want to ask you before we turn to everybody else. But Jeremy, do you want to pose your question to our panelists?
Sure. It's a little silly, but a little serious. I'm wondering if memes have had any impact on your own spirituality or worldview in this way. Yeah, just in general.
Yeah.
Sorry, Jeremy. Could you repeat it one more time?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if memes have influenced your spirituality in any way that you can recognize. I mean, I know that there's tons of, straightforward religion memes. I know there's also things that might make you rethink things that you've held deeply in the past. That's kind of the purpose, right?
Well,
so I'm just wondering if any of you feel that has any influence. And it seems like a very millennial thing. So
it is a very millennial question. Like, here's a very millennial answer. I am part of the cult of Bernie memes. So absolutely, yes, it has.
How has it affected your religiosity or spiritual beliefs? Just bringing joy?
Memes make me smile. And the religious ones that I've seen, I mean, I feel like I all I'm doing is dogging on religion and faith this whole past hour. But the ones I've seen have been like kind of shedding light on some of the one I'm thinking of is where it's a meme where they actually draw the pictures of what Christian like deities and angels and gods and archangels and what they actually look like. That's the meme. And it's I don't know if you know the one I'm talking about, but it's like, oh, that's what they mean by that. And it kind of pushes me away because it's a very literal drawings of things that my parents probably never tried to picture, right?
Right, looking at the actual how an angel is described in the Bible versus the popular representation of what we have now. That's essentially the breakdown of that particular meme.
Exactly.
And Jeremy loves to talk about that, so he could later if anybody wants some clarification on that. Lachelle or Norhan, do you want to talk about memes and religion?
Sure. I will say, I don't know if they've strengthened my faith, but I find a lot of them amusing. There's one that I really like in particular, and I think it came out either right after the election or after January 6th. And it's a picture of, Jesus, or the Jesus that we typically think of in America. And then it's like another picture of like just an old lady with a telephone. And it's kind of like, calling Jesus, come back, we need you, which I think is just hilarious. So I enjoy them actually. And a lot of the more Christian ones actually resonate with me. So it's probably because of my upbringing. So maybe I am, less of a heretic than I think I am.
I can't say that I've seen many religious memes or any of them. I must be on a different algorithm, but they do bring me happiness, but I don't think they've affected my religiosity that much.
Yeah. Awesome. Anybody from the audience have any questions now? Wendy.
I think it's my duty to ask, particularly Lachelle and Eric. Can you explain for this audience why, first of all, me as a Jewish person, we have a tremendous amount of space for doubt. That's like part of Judaism. And so I invite that into your thought process as you think about me building a team. As we know, the religious landscape is shifting and affiliation is changing, and we're looking to build for the future. Why does Tri-Faith speak to you as a millennial, and how does that impact your religiosity? And Norhan, I'd like to know that for you as well. Your family is very engaged with Tri-Faith. And so how how and why related to your identity does tri-faith fit in?
And I'll kick that off. That's a very good question. And for me, when I'm closing in literally here on 1 year at Tri-Faith, and when the opportunity was presented to me, my first reaction was faith. That's not something that is high on my identity list. But then I started looking deeper into the organization, and I saw I saw empathy, fostering empathy. Now that's something that I am all about. Getting to understand and to feel and to empathize with people is something that I think is the bedrock to making life better for everybody and building bridges. That's the other piece, is that we can't do anything alone. No matter what it is, building bridges is so important when we're trying to do so much good in the world. So those two pieces, that's what hooked me into Tri-Faith, because that's a humanistic thing for me. But it's so important. And then the third thing was, well, I'm really big into the DEI, sphere, and I'm a big believer in people being able to bring their identities, their whole self, into an organization, into a location, into the world, into the community. And Tri-Faith, that's like our bread and butter, being able to bring that religious identity. And that's what I got really behind, those three things. And that's what called to me when it comes to Tri-Faith.
Yeah, and I think for me, one of the issues why I struggle with the Christian faith in particular is because I've had so many experiences, and I know so many people who, claim to be Christian, but if you knew them or you just went by, how they live their life, you would think there's no way this person is a Christian. So one of the things that drew me to Tri-Faith was the mission, and the fact that I think it's actually going to call people to live their faith, and walk in their faith. Like the Bible always talks about, and Jesus always talks about, love and love thy neighbor. And I feel like that's something that a lot of Christians are pretty bad at, actually. And so the draw for me with Tri-Faith was, I felt like what we were trying to achieve with the three congregations and being co-located is really forcing people to take a look at that and really start to love their neighbor and love thy neighbor, and really do what the Bible would command us to do, without all the other noise, which is what we hear about just all the time. I feel like it's just noise. So that was really the draw for me. And maybe I'm hoping that it will help restore my faith, or some reverence, I guess. Like my mom, she doesn't just have faith, but she has a certain reverence for her faith that I don't have. And honestly, even if it's not Christianity, I would love to get to a place where I could feel that way about, something in the religious sphere.
What I've really liked about Tri-Faith is that, growing up, for me at least, and I'm assuming you guys may have had similar experiences as well, but I feel like especially with the three Abrahamic religions, there was such a divide. Like Christianity is the right one, Judaism is the right one, Muslim's the right one, and I just didn't like the idea of that, because what's always resonated with me, that I've always truly really believed in, is no one is above anyone else. We're all judged the same. We're all equal to each other. So what I really like about Tri-Faith is that it takes that feud out of the picture, that we can all respect each other's beliefs and be able to religiously identify in a comfortable space where that tension between religions isn't there anymore,
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Cool. We have about 10 minutes. Oh, okay, go Ivy.
Sorry, I was having some electronic difficulties. I was curious, for the panelists, what do you think is your definition between spirituality and religion? Or do you even make that distinction?
I can start on this one. So When I think of spirituality versus religion, spirituality, I feel like it's like within me and within like what I believe in. When I think of religion, it's more of like following the Quran in my it, sorry, my personal my personal life. But with spirituality, I don't really intertwine it much with religion. I really just find it as something that I do for myself and for what I believe in aside from religious views.
Yeah, and I'm kind of similar. I think I see religion as more of the dogma, or, whatever faith you practice, you have the Bible or the Quran or the Torah. And then I see spirituality more so as how you personally interact with the religion, the teachings of, your faith.
Yeah, I would agree with both of those sentiments. The spirituality for me, definitely that inner energy, where religion is, and how I practice my spirituality. And I feel like when you get those surveys that say how's your spiritual health, I think it's very high, because I'm very, again, going back to the service piece, I put a lot of time into that. But in the religious side of things, really, I think of it as more the institutional things, which includes the dogma, right? Which includes the sacred text, things like that. But yeah, two totally different things.
I'm curious, can you all talk about that? Is there an intersection between if politics that is with spirituality or with religion? Or I don't, like politics seems such an important part of this conversation and nobody talked about it yet.
Yeah, I just didn't want to open that can of worms, Wendy.
Sorry. Well,
It's, I don't know how to answer that, but what comes to mind first for me when you mix politics into it, it always seems that, I don't even know if I want to go down this rabbit hole, but it's used a lot in politics to segregate and divide and to categorize people. Much like we do with identity politics, it gets very messy very fast. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, real quick, I want to make a comment on what Eric just said. Is at the same time we're embracing those boxes, but also we see how those boxes are extremely limiting, right? Like this program is about a box, right? And so that's I just wanted to point out that irony of sorts, I guess. Sorry, Lachelle, I cut you off.
Oh, no, you're fine. I was just going to agree with what Eric said. And I've been having these conversations I have a lot of evangelical friends from college. I used to go to an evangelical church, and some of them are really struggling right now with their identity because of what's been happening. And what I keep hearing from some of my friends, even locally, they kind of feel like a lot of evangelicals lost the plot when they became too involved in politics. And it's kind of been a corrupting force for the faith. And I think I probably fall along those lines, definitely, that it's a fine line. And I think it's an easy line to step over. And I think a lot of people have. And I think it has really corrupted a lot of people's faiths, or their view of their faith and their spirituality, quite frankly.
I agree with Lachelle and Eric. I think there's a basis for me where politics, yes, are included in my thoughts or my like spirituality and religion, because I feel like politics are so tied to with like your moral values as well as your morals and your values. But I don't like to get it too complicated either, because I feel like if I can separate those out, that do rather than intertwine everything.
Okay. Panelists, do you have any last remarks or maybe a myth that you want to dispel about either your religious belief, spiritual belief, or your generational identity?
Can I answer Anne's question? Sorry, I just saw
Oh,
Anne's
sure. I
question.
did not see it. Yep.
And it's a really good question. And if anybody saw it, everybody saw it in the chat, but Anne was asking, how do you think organized religion has missed the boat on spirituality? One thing I will say, Anne, especially during times of COVID, I think a real opportunity was missed to encourage people to focus on the inner and their personal spirituality. And instead it became a lot of, banging on the doors to let people come back to church, which church is a great thing. But I think that was a missed opportunity to encourage people to express their spirituality in ways that don't necessarily involve, large gatherings at church. One thing I would encourage people to do, if you haven't done so, even though I said it was an all-day thing, is to attend a Black church. I do think it's a wonderful, unique experience in America. The music, the preaching, the clothing, it's a religious experience. So I would encourage everybody, if you haven't done so, here in Omaha or wherever you are, is to attend one of your Black churches if you get a chance.
Mm-hmm.
Let me jump on that. Thank you for pointing that question out, Lachelle. Because with organized religion growing up, it was always people knocking at our door, or like my mom pushing me to, you need to connect with this person. You need to connect with this God, with this saint, with this. You need to connect with that belief. And for me, like, I just wanted to know, how can I be a better person? How can I serve other people better? Like, teach me those, give me those stories, give me those lessons. And I'm all about that all day, every day. So I think that's where organized religion can maybe try to, it's important to have a connection with the higher ups. But how can I be the best version of myself? And I think that's where organized religion maybe missed the boat there.
Ooh, there's a lot of really good stuff happening in the chat. But we have 2 minutes. Any final remarks from any of the panelists or any of our audience?
Can I make a statement here? This is Jean in Minneapolis. And if Eric is a millennial, then I'm a double millennial. What I see here as a real positive is the openness of you guys to ask questions and to seek, and the freedom to search. I'm calling myself a seeker, so I'm very much like you, but I just think that's a power and a wonderful thing, and I'm happy to see it. And last Sunday morning, I did a Zoom session of a service that Rabbi Deanna did, and I think it was Saturday night. She was welcoming a new family into the synagogue, and she said, "May you have the wisdom of Abraham, finding the courage to question and the confidence that there is an answer." And I listened to that over and over and over to me, and I'm glad to see all you guys doing that. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, that will conclude tonight right at 8 o'clock on the dot. And I just want to thank everybody for coming today and listening to this perspective. As I said, we'll be doing more programming along lines of generation so that we can help to understand each other better, because it's not just about the religious diversity, it's also about our age diversity, our ability, our gender, all of that, right? So we want to make sure that everybody feels welcomed. I will be sending out a follow-up email with a recording of the conversation and with the survey in there. So when you get that email, if you can click on the survey link, that would be great. It helps us to figure out how we can make our programming better for you. So with that being said, I hope everybody has a nice, warm evening, and I'm on my way home. So we'll see you another time. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Amanda.